And why did that happen?
Because I sued my college.
What? Gentle Virkein Dhar sued the college.
Yeah. After that show, I was like, bhai, nahi ho sakta hai. I cannot be dancing all the time. It's only using one side of my brain and my other brain is not happening. I thought nobody would give me a job, so I never looked for one.
Wow.
These people have low attendance, so they cannot take class. I was like, what? Who took attendance? I think Poppy Seed was basically me thinking that people will take me more seriously if I call itself a name. Like my mom put me in every class that you can think of. Dance, music, art, theatre, सब में डाल दो, घर के बाहर रहो. The interest was to build the space for people like us. You go for a film today for an evening out. Why can't you go for a theatre show?
Welcome once again to Stumble, where I am with somebody who's very, very special to Stumble because she's the person who sort of saw this vision along with me, the first stumbler, if I was to say so, and who's actually worked on most everything that is going to be at the final festival, has often asked me questions that I have no answers for, and so I keep stumbling through the answers and finding new people to recruit who can maybe help me with those answers. And who has really been possibly the lifeblood of this part of Commune, which is our Creative Curiosity Festival, in a sense, if one was to call it that, Virkein Dhar. Virkein, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Roshan, for having me. I'm
It's-
super excited about this.
It's always so wonderful to see you because you're one person when you meet, there's a positive energy to people. You always have this positive energy around.
I've heard that a lot.
You have?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. But our meeting was the strangest meeting possible during the pandemic of all
Correct.
things, right? I think you had heard Amit Verma's podcast where I was talking about the creator economy. And something happened that made you write me an email. What was it?
I mean, I don't think I did. I mean, I knew of you from before. It's not like I didn't. But I think I just never. I think something in that conversation made me want to write to you because it felt like. I think with Amit's podcast, you were able to not just hear what people are doing right now, but you know where they've been. What is that entire kind of journey been? These are like 2-3 hours, 4-5 hours almost. Nikhil's was 7 hours.
Yeah.
But you actually kind of get to see what people are thinking, and I think that's what I really love about his podcast. I don't think I had one thing that I remember like this, but I think I kind of just thought that seems like this person has really figured out this whole creative money. How does it all kind of come together? He's still kind of enjoying it. It always kind of lots of parts of it I guess made me laugh. So it seemed like I should just be friends with this person.
No, it was so wonderful. I mean,
So-
and your email came, and then we had a conversation. And I was going through my "let's be more discerning in one's choices" moment, and I wrote to you saying that, hey, tell me why do you want me to why do you want to connect, and what do you think I could help you with, and you came back with not a conversation but with a deck. Like, are you a deck kind of person?
I'm a very deck kind of person.
Yeah.
Actually, at that moment, I was also kind of making sense of many things. And the easiest way that I find to do it is to put it together, right? Like this whiteboarding, post-it person, I am very that. So whenever I'm like confused about being able to think through an idea, I kind of put it in front of me in whichever way. So when I was in college and you had to write dissertations, even though it's got nothing to do with the visual medium, right? It's writing. But I still had to like take out printouts and make sense of that story by being able to see it. So I guess that's what I was doing with the decks. Now it was digital to say that let's not be wasteful of paper, but try and put it all together to just make sense of it. Because you have the ability to move things around. You have the ability to not get stuck with the same way that you started writing it, right? So that's essentially why I made the deck.
No, and it was fascinating because we budgeted an hour for the conversation. I think we'd only reached like 12 or 13, and you were telling me all these wonderful stories about starting and being born in Jammu, etc. And then all these stories, and not just the stories, the work you'd done, and to actually find somebody who's, comes from a school of planning and architecture background, has also danced, has been a part of Odd Bird. I mean, I don't want to sum it all up. I wanted to discover all that as we go along. But the other really unique thing, sort of jumped out at me was the fact that you were somebody who was looking at system planning, or is that the discipline?
I mean, yeah, some people call it systems design, but you kind of think of it slightly from the larger picture rather than just the details. Um, I think that really came from, I think that's something I find over a period of time was just innate. Like I like details for sure, but it doesn't mean like I want to, like there's this whole idea about being the generalist versus the expert, right? Certainly, I think in practice, everybody seems like I seem like the generalist, but oftentimes the flip side of the generalist is that they're not good at anything, right? That whole old school thinking of jack of all trades, master of none. But actually, there's a line that finishes it, which is jack of all trades, master of none, but the master of one. And the idea is that you know a little bit about many things because it allows you to do at least that one thing that you do really well. And I think for me, it's kind of bringing together many things, and systems do that, right? It's not just one person or one idea, but when a few different things have to come together is when a system gets built in its core. And when that is required, then there's process, right? So I guess both process and system kind of work hand in hand. And to be able to think through what the other person is thinking, right? That's super interesting because I think only when you're able to understand the other person will you be able to kind of put it all together. So you need to be able to understand a little bit of everyone so that they intersect at some point.
No, and what I'm going to try and do is this is divided into three parts. And the very first part, what I want to do is actually sort of try and build this little deck about you and look at your life and then actually zoom out and look at your life. Because you're 4 years old, you're in Jammu. You're living with your grandmother, right? Where were your parents?
No, they were also there.
Then why would you say living with my grandmother?
As in, like, it was, I think I was spending more time with her,
Okay.
is probably how I would say it. It was actually the same year when, I mean, my parents, I mean, I'm from Kashmir, but my parents hadn't kind of got displaced like many others. But I had a cousin, very close cousins who were living with us as well. So it was, I remember it being just a very full house. While my dad used to travel quite a bit, he was a chartered accountant at the time. So he would travel quite a bit, I remember, maybe to some extent. And my mom she was teaching then. So maybe I just remember more of my grandmother and all of these other cousins more than anything else. But yeah, they were there as well.
Got it. Okay. And was your grandmother though the kind of grandmothers who tell you stories and read you things? What was it? What was your relationship?
She's a very particular kind of grandmother.
Okay.
Like she's taught all of us a very specific skill, which is that she looks at you without saying a word and you know what she means and what she wants. I mean, there are my cousins or my brother who's not picked up that skill very well. And my mother gets quite irritated sometimes. But I don't know how she does it. But I think it's the same thing that she's taught her kids, where, from far away, or even if she says that it's something else, like she would say, ye radio ko idhar se utha ke wahan rakh do. She doesn't mean radio, she means telephone, right? Like it's that blatant. But what is she looking at? What is she saying to you? You have to figure it out. So like half-hearted information or wrong information, which she's not doing on purpose. I mean, it's just like, galti se bol diya. There's also a thing in Kashmiri where everything which is not today is parso. Right?
Achha.
Yeah, it's a very Kashmiri thing.
Give me an example.
Like if she's telling me that, I went somewhere 4 months ago, it is parso. If I went somewhere yesterday, it is parso.
So parso
So everything is
spans-
parso. It spans a pretty long period of time. So now you have to figure out many things because she used to keep saying, वो जो उस दिन ये किया था तो वो क्यों नहीं आज किया? I was like, when are you talking about, right? So there's a lot of this like figuring out half-hearted things, and me and my first cousin, I think we've gotten it a lot more. So we keep laughing about it, where I think the boys in the family haven't figured it out, but the girls in the family have figured it out.
Girls normally figure out more things, I've figured out.
I guess, yeah. I guess at least the ones which are about ishare.
So I think a large part of life is that. But from this, the next most interesting fact that I read about you was you took to swimming at the age of 5 and then water polo at the age of 12.
Yeah, my dad used to love swimming. So I believe he threw me into a pool when I was young. And I love the water. I still do. It's like one thing why I have moved to Goa and I have a pool right in front of me. But yeah, we was in the school team. From there, kind of went into the Delhi team. Somehow people started playing water polo. We were one of 2 or 3 schools in Delhi at the time that used to play water polo, actually.
Which school were you in?
Modern Barakamba. So there was modern, there was DPS to some extent. There was a couple of other people, but they used to all kind of come together at Talkatora Stadium to swim. So
Right.
when we kind of got slightly better, we used to go there to train. So first we used to go to Talkatora in the morning at about 4:30. It was still dark. You would kind of get left on the road, and then to warm up, you would run till the gate. And my dad would then go for a walk somewhere, to Lodi Gardens or something, come back, pick me up, drop me to school. We would have a second practice in school.
And
I would want to miss assembly for it. It was a great way to miss assembly, actually. And then go into class. So yeah, we used to, like, pretty serious swimmer, I would have to say. Water polo was fun. It's a pretty violent sport.
Yeah,
I
throwing
realized
things at people.
later. Yeah, but it was super fun. I really enjoyed it.
Were you one of those?
I was so in water polo, there's 2 kinds. There's center forward, which is like your big person. So I used to have a friend who was, like the super strong person who would just like be the rock, right? But I was left and right. So left and right is the one who kind of constantly nimble enough to move about, give her the ball and, kind of push it forward.
Wow.
So that was fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun or whatever. I can barely stay, afloat. I don't know what strangest thing happened. I never got the breathing right, and I think that's the whole thing
Actually,
about
it
swimming.
is the entire thing. Yeah, everybody who's not able to think that they're able to swim, it is the breathing. So I remember when I was in school, we used to have a fantastic coach. I mean, he was great for that stage of swimming. Where for I remember months, all I was doing was holding the wall and just doing kick, 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 kick. Then for another full month, all I was doing was breathing, breathing, breathing. So I think he kind of like managed to get that discipline into you, and I think, yeah, he was fantastic, Mr. Sachdeva.
Wow.
Amazing.
Okay. And moving from Jammu to Delhi, was it part of just your
I
parents?
think it was my father, like work,
Work.
everything. So yeah, I just kind of got him out. He actually lived in Delhi. He went to Hindu college. Yeah. So I know a little bit of his stories of the whole Stephen's Hindu
Hindu rivalry, huh?
with the
My God.
cafe and all of that stuff. Not that
Yeah.
I've ever been there too much. I think he took me once because he wanted to show me his college and things like that. But he was, so when he was in Jammu, because his father, my grandfather at the time, he kind of, I think, had a thinking, and he was slightly ahead of his times, I would have to say. He was a civil engineer, and he had moved to Jammu for work, right? But with the government, all of that. I think he had felt at the time that not life is fair. So he wanted to kind of, get his children out.
Nice.
And say, you go. So he was first actually in modern school. He studied his last 2 years in school, so he was in the hostel, and then he went to Hindu. So he had stayed some years in Delhi already, and then was kind of, when he got married, was in Jammu, but then they decided to move quickly enough. So all of my school, from play school to everything, was Delhi.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you make some really good friends at that point in time? Or, I mean, because some
Yeah,
people
yeah.
make friends in school, which they have till the end.
I
and,
have a bunch of friends, yeah, who
Because
I've known since
you have
I
a
was
whole
in
bunch of
kindergarten.
friends.
I mean, I would say like there are 3 who I've known ever since I was in kindergarten. So
Even now?
Yeah, we're great friends.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Because I find that in today's day and age, very often, people do have special friends, but I sometimes find that the length, or it has shortened a lot.
I think what's been interesting is that we've managed to, even though we've lived sometimes in different cities, somebody's gone to study, we've just, I think we've always, it's not like I call them every day. We don't speak every day. But I know that if I call them tomorrow, they will pick up my phone, and we're going to start from where we left off. So I have a few that are like super old, like school friends. So 2 of them, one now lives in Singapore, one lives in Delhi. But all throughout, we've always kind of been there. She studied in Singapore. I went to visit her. So there was all of that that's always happened. And I think it's also because our parents are friends. So there's kind of this because it's been so long, and obviously at that time we were friends because the parents were friends, right? Not for anything else. It depends on which
Which
parent.
birthday parties you're going to.
Yeah, like
and-
which parent kind of decides to be friends with you, right? And that's how you get to meet your friend more than others.
Right.
So we've had like up and down. It's not like we've always been amazing and things like that, but I think it's kind of stuck on.
Still around, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your first creative memory from that time? I mean, when did you first engage with something creative? When did you feel, oh, maybe this is something I'd like to do?
So, I used to draw all the time. I think that was something that I always did.
Yeah.
Apparently, I used to also dress up when I was a kid, but I guess that's every kid.
No.
No?
Yeah, some of us just didn't. Yeah, I mean, no, not every kid.
Yeah, so I think I used to draw. Like, I think it was I remember that I was around color and paper and drawing something or the other, coloring always. I remember when we were young, my mum, they got us, both me and my brother, got those cross-stitching kits.
Oh,
But
God.
I had no patience for it. My brother was amazing. I just did some like jaldi and she never framed it also. But my two of the ones from my brother are still in our house.
Yeah.
Framed.
Amazing.
But yeah, I think draw. Like my mom is the kind who wants you to be busy all the time. So she's not the kind who thinks that for the longest time holiday was meant to be ab kya karenge. While my dad is completely the opposite. He's like, कुछ नहीं करेंगे, हम बैठेंगे और मैं book पढ़ूंगा.
Ah. Where did you go for holidays?
I think my first trip was to Mahabalipuram. I remember, and
Quite
we
a
had
choice,
gone.
huh?
Yeah, so we had actually gone because they took both me and my brother to get a mundan in Tirupati.
यार बड़ी इक्लेक्टिक फैमिली है. जम्मू से दिल्ली आती है, वाटर पोलो खिलाती है, उसके बाद मुंडन के लिए ले जाती है. तो ये क्या हो रहा है?
Yeah, so my dad had something like his elder brother had some
That's
kind of
yeah,
connection,
yeah.
and he said so he'd kind of automatically, because he was really close to his elder brother. So इसीलिए हम बहुत बारी तिरुपति गए तो बहुत साल. So वहाँ से कहीं. So I remember one time we went to Hyderabad, one time we went to Mahabalipuram. We did this one big Europe trip, I remember, which was like फिर से कभी नहीं होएगा. It was one of those SOTC type of ones
Oh
which
my
take you
God.
from one place to the other. And even when I was, I don't know, maybe like 9, 10 or something, it's like there's something off about this entire trip. There was lots of Gujaratis. My dad hated it. My mom was constantly straggling to get food for us because we were so late every time getting up, going out. That I think the one I remember, it was Holland, right? So somewhere Italy, France, We got to the Netherlands and something had happened. I think one of the families, somebody had gotten late, बहुत time लगा, तो उनका पूरा schedule off हो गया. So the minute the schedule went off, I remember, they couldn't actually take the amount of time that we had to do in Holland. So they took us to Little Holland. And it's like a big park with like all
I
of the
know, with this
miniature buildings,
miniature
right?
That's
And I
what
was
they
like,
sold you.
Oh my God. Like now, like I remember this feeling saying, this is weird.
It is.
It was our one and only this kind of trip in my life.
यार ये बहुत गलत बात है. This is just not done.
It's pretty, yeah.
Yeah. My parents went on one of these Kesari tour and travels kind of thing. Whatever. They swore never again.
Yeah.
Because they said, you get to a place and it's like, chalo.
Chalo. It's like constant.
And it's that. So like after that, I told my parents, listen, you come with me on a holiday, which is what we still sometimes manage to do. Pre-pandemic, at least, was a regular thing.
Dad anyway wasn't excited about it. I think mom was like, हाँ इतनी सारी चीजें एक साथ हो जाएगी. Now she's, हो गया.
Actually, I
Never again.
What makes you then take up school of planning and architecture?
I mean, it was a lot of like what you don't want to do. It was like, cut out the stuff that you can't. So my dad, for some reason, wanted me to be a doctor. I mean, one, because my brother is a doctor. But also, he kind of felt like I was a caring person. So I was like, वो तो nurse करते हैं ना फिर. So anyway,
Very caring nurse बन जाओ.
But then that's what I said to him. But I was like, yeah, but I can't. Like, I used to be very bad at rote learning. Like, super bad. So, like, we were forced to do Sanskrit, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. वो फलम फले फलानी मुझे कभी नहीं आया. I could never remember it because it was, I mean, there was some logic to it, but the first set you had to just learn. Like, there was no logic to the first set.
Yeah.
So, I was very bad. Everybody used to say ये तो बड़ा scoring subject है. I was like मेरे लिए तो नहीं है.
Sanskrit saved me in the 10th, genuinely did. Because I got really good marks and
Really?
I'm like,
I was very
90s
bad.
में आ गए तो killer है boss.
हाँ, so I was very bad at it. तो मैं तो हिंदी was more what I picked later also. But I said देखो biology में तो सब कुछ ही बस याद करना पड़ता है तो मेरे बस की बात नहीं है. Anyway, but until 12th grade, I had everything. Physics, chemistry, math, biology. They said देखो बाद में चूज कर लेना अभी कौन चूज कर सकता है मतलब देर ऑल्सो राइट अब कौन when you're in 10th grade you're 14 years old or whatever how will you know what you have to pick so they said no science you have to know science you have to be a person of science so physics chemistry math bio everything I had
And then by elimination that college
by
choice got made.
elimination yeah so basically I said I mean it feels like I obviously cannot be doctor then what is left is engineering ठीक है बट थोड़ा सा बोरिंग टाइप लग रहा है somebody told me actually right in front of our house used to be a training institute for architecture for entrance exam to architecture
You had
so
a
I used to
vision
always
board in
see a
front of you.
board in front of you
Vision board.
so they
आज-
said
आजकल होता है.
oh इसमें थोड़ा ड्राइंग भी करना होता है थोड़ा
तो
सा
आता ही
मैथ वैथ भी हो जाता है
भी आता है.
तो ये कर लो
My
तो
goodness.
मैं 12th ग्रेड के बाद 1 महीना उस ट्रेनिंग इंस्टीट्यूट में गई थी
अच्छा गई भी थी.
हाँ मतलब they made you do some color theory stuff and
So you enjoyed
yeah it was fun and then you had to give your AI EEE where there's two papers there's the engineering paper and then the same day in the evening you have to give the architecture paper physics math is common I mean used to be actually I don't think it's the case anymore physics math used to be common and this was an extra paper for drawing which you had to do then somebody had told me about NID, but I had missed the bus because NID you have to do December and this is like March. So I had already missed that bus. फिर ऐसे fun के लिए IIT का भी exam दे दिया था.
वो भी दे दिया था.
हाँ, but I knew there was nothing to come out of it. So yeah, it was just elimination. I mean, for me, at that time, I knew there had to be doctor, engineer, some professional course basically. I guess that's what they had always told us that you do this first and then later you do whatever you want. So,
Delhi is a place where there's so much opportunity. There are so many options. Like when you were talking about water polo in my head, I was remembering two friends of mine who could play polo. Right? And people would sometimes get up at 6 in the morning and go and do horse riding. Because कहाँ जा रहे हो? नहीं वो वो
Polo ground में.
It's crazy.
Race course road,
Race
हाँ.
course road वगैरह पे ये सब चीजें हो रही होती थी. There must have been lots of fun things that you managed to do at that period of time because really when I went to Delhi in college it really just opened up my mind to so many things. Prakriti Maidan,
Yeah.
बगल में film festival, कहीं पर कुछ हो रहा है, expo चल रहा है, music concerts. It's so many things going on at that time.
Actually, Delhi is really great in that way.
Yeah?
I mean, I do feel like it's also, I have to give credit to school. I think even before I got to college, I got to experience a lot of it in school.
modern, yeah.
From extracurricular, blah, 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 debating society, interact club, Spick Meke. Actually, modern school was like
Big on
center of
Spick
Spick
Meke,
Meke.
yes.
So we were constantly there. Like we used to have the all-nighters then.
I've been to one or
in
two of them.
Shankarlal Hall, which was our,
A beautiful auditorium.
yeah, fantastic auditorium. So, I mean, that was something that was right in my lap. Like, I didn't even have to go anywhere, right? Like, we had to be volunteers in the evening. So, yeah, Spick Meke used to be super, like, I was
City
outside
fort.
class more than inside class many times. But I think school was really interesting in that way, and one I remember, and that, I guess that's also to do with dance because for the longest time I was dancing outside of school but not inside. So like my mom put me in every class that you can think of, dance, music, art, theatre, सब में डाल दो, घर के बाहर रहो. So we were in constantly, the first thing we had to do every summer holiday was make ourselves a timetable. तुम यहाँ पे कब जाओगे, वहाँ पे कब जाओगे, यहाँ पे कब जाओगे. So she was like, this is how you have to be busy. You cannot just be sitting doing nothing. So that's essentially what I knew. And used to go to the Kathak Kendra. She actually sent me to one of the teachers, Geetanjali Lal, I remember, who used to live very close to our house at the time. So I kind of had a difficult relationship with Kathak, I will have to say. I went into many different teachers, many different times. She kept pushing me because she said, nahi, karna chahiye. Not that she's some dancer, by the way. Huh? Nothing of that sort. She is far from, like at least at the time, far from any kind of creative pursuit of her own, if I can say so. Like, does not read books. hates it.
Wow.
Does not sing, dance, or have any rhythm ability in her. But kind of like pushed us to do this anyway, right? I guess she just thought that maybe it wasn't something that she got, and that's why you should do it. But also because, she was working. What would we do all day sitting at home, unsupervised? So you should go out and do things.
Yeah, this supervision by timetable is a very classic,
Yeah.
parent trope that everybody keeps doing. There's a timetable of things that Virkein has done, which I haven't even got to chapter 1 right now, because there's so much that's happened. But we'll come back to that right after this break on Stumble. Thank you for listening to Stumble. Why don't you join our tribe of community builders, creators, and culture shapers? If you find this interesting, all you need to do is go and subscribe to stumble.community on Instagram. Welcome back to Stumble. We are here with Virkein Dhar, who's a very, very integral part of everything that Stumble is doing, and you'll hear about that in the next segment. But before that, I'm going to ask you, dance has been very important to you. In fact, when we'd spoken the first time, you were telling me about dance, and I'm sometimes just looking at what makes people's eyes light up, and your eyes lit up when you talked of dance.
Yeah.
So how did dance happen to you? What were you doing with it? How did Ignite happen then?
I guess my mom was the first one. She threw me into a Kathak class. So that was the first starting point. I guess I was about 8, possibly 8 or 9. I think I kind of, maybe in the beginning, enjoyed it enough because I've seen like videos of me and others where people said I used to go to people's birthday parties and start dancing. So apparently I was one of those kids. But I guess that's why she thought, let's just send her to dance class. So she sent me to dance class. It continued for a while, went from a couple of dance teachers where at some point, I think she thought it might have been my teenage thing, but I think it wasn't. About 12, 13, I used to have a teacher who used to come home because I had refused to go anywhere at some point in between. So she said, nahi, ghar pe leke aayenge. So she found some junior person at the Kathak Kendra, asked him to come home every Sunday to teach me. And then I think, this I remember very clearly. He was sitting in my living room and I was in my bedroom. I started crying and I said, mujhe nahi karna. So that was the end of Kathak. One particular Sunday where I just decided this is not happening anymore.
It sounds so much like
I cannot do it.
My daughter, when she's done this to the guitar, she's done this to the piano, 2 teachers. Don't.
हाँ तो अब ये ख़त्म हो गया तो अब बेचारा मतलब it was quite embarrassing I'm sure for my mother at the time because he's sitting in my living room and he said yeah it's okay, he could hear me saying all of this. So I think it took her just about 2 months later when it was summer holidays and she found so my parents both respond to advertisements very well, I must say. They're one of those. So I think she must have gone around seeing a random advertisement which actually spoke of Ashley Lobo.
Danceworks.
Yeah, and it was the first year of them setting up space in Delhi.
Wow.
In Bluebell School, and she decided to send me.
Right opposite LSR.
Yes, right opposite LSR, and I went there twice a week for the summer, saying, "Chalo, theek hai." She said, "Ye nahi karna, to ye try kar lo." I said, "Theek hai," तो मैं चली गई. But that was pretty interesting. I think the fact that it was a small set of people at the time. Yeah. He had just come back after being trained in Australia. I think it all seemed very interesting to me. You'd seen it in film. There was ballet, there was jazz, there was all of this like super interesting stuff.
Which year is this?
I mean, I was in school, so like maybe 8th or 9th grade. 2000 maybe, like 99, 2000.
No, I'm trying to figure out that Dil To Pagal and all has happened.
Yeah, it's happened.
Because that actually was a big reason for people to start looking at it.
I think people also saw it, so I recognized
That's
it.
Exactly.
Correct. So you recognized
people thought they were electrocuted bodies. Then they realized that there was something going on which had some purpose.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's true, like jazz hands.
Shamak all the time. Jazz hands. I would say electrocuted bodies. Which like Roshan.
Yeah, so actually Shamak was already existing in
Correct.
Delhi at the time.
Correct.
I guess he was bigger in Bombay, but I hadn't heard of him.
Yeah.
So I remember going to both places and he had already started classes for the summer or something. So that's why I never got there. So ये was like second choice because वो सुना था हर रोज दिखता था न्यूज़पेपर में कुछ ना कुछ summer thing. तो अब वो नहीं हुआ तो इसीलिए ये कर लिया. So I actually got into Ashley because that's what you had the option of at the time. But I think that I really stuck on. Like it really, like somehow, I think that was one. And then in school, I think at the same time, there was a dance teacher in modern school for a very long time, Narendra Sharma. And he set up something called Bhumika in Delhi. But he's considered, I guess, the father of modern Indian dance. When you say modern Indian, in a way that he kind of brought together Indian motifs and forms, but with this language that he had also learnt, which was modern, right? Modern in the way that, the European version of modern dance, right? And I remember there was a workshop in school when I was in the 11th grade. So it was a summer workshop. He'd already he was almost 91, I remember, at the time when he
And he was
came
still
to
doing
do
a
this.
workshop?
He was doing it after a very long time, because what we were doing in school was his son, Bharat Sharma, was recreating some of his original ballets, which he had done in modern school as a teacher, with some school students. So his students now were kind of coming back and presenting this in school. And as a kind of a side note, on one weekend, he decided to do this workshop. And I remember thinking, I was like, what is this? Like, I didn't even know. Like, there was no language. I'd never seen it before. But there was this, just kind of being part of that workshop. And I did it only on whim. I was like, yeah, this seems interesting. So there was me and another friend who used to be a dancer. And him and I, we went into this workshop, and everybody else like, ये बड़ा weird सा लग रहा है, पता नहीं क्या है. I was like, नहीं, देखते हैं क्या है. तो हम दोनों घुस गए उस workshop में. But I think that and this kind of happening at the same time, I think that's what kind of got stuck with me with this idea of contemporary, with this idea of like, what does it mean to start to look at the Indian form, which you knew existed. But I think now if I go back, I realize why I didn't stick to Kathak, right? It was because of the stories that I was being told. Like every time you had to present or you had to perform, you were going back to like Radha, you were going back to Krishna, you were going back to all of these particular stories which maybe I just couldn't like connect with, right? It was just feeling very like from another world altogether, and it didn't feel like it. Here they were saying, listen to your body, and you're kind of like imagining another set of things in this body, which I thought, oh, that feels more me, right? It feels like, okay, you're talking about me, you're not talking about some random person I'm portraying. So that kind of got stuck on. I think I used to go to class. I was still in school, but I saw all these girls from LSR who used to constantly be dancing. They would never go to class, but they would only be sitting there and dancing the whole time. I was like, ये करना है. तो मैंने सोचा कि जब कॉलेज में जाएंगे तब करेंगे. अभी तो स्कूल में टाइम नहीं है, स्विमिंग भी कर रहे हैं. I had to constantly kind of pick between, going to a match or, going to go dance somewhere. So they used to have a training program also where you would kind of spend more time beyond just regular class, which I never got onto because it was in this, the idea for them was to train teachers to get there, right? And that's why you would spend more time. I was like, हाँ, जब college में जाऊँगी तब करूँगी. So I waited, and then I said, suddenly I realized I went to architecture school.
That's what I was wondering, वहाँ पे time ही नहीं होता.
वहाँ पे कुछ करने का time नहीं है. So I guess, yeah, it just so happened. So I still kind of stayed on for about, I think, first 2 years. On the weekend, one of the teachers who used to teach in Dance Works, Swati, she decided to kind of step out and set up her own space in Gurgaon. At that time, when I was also at the end of school, I had moved to my parents had moved to Gurgaon from Delhi. So it kind of made sense. I would come home every weekend because I was in the hostel in Delhi. So every weekend I would go do class with her. So that kind of continued. And I think actually she was my first paycheck, I will have to say.
Yeah?
To teach, yeah. I used to teach dance on the weekend with her. So she gave me my first paycheck.
I remember, Swati, because we did a lot of work in those early days.
Yeah.
With Dance Works. And I knew the entire team. I'm quickly going to just ask you something about architecture school, which is that, did you also have to live with that whole Ayn Rand Howard Roark bit?
To some extent.
Right? Did you read it?
Yeah. So my English teacher in
Fountainheads.
school, Fountainhead, she gave it to me when I first got into college, when she got to know. So yeah, I actually, that's a funny thing. So she, I think, must have picked up one of those, the pirated versions of the book. So she gave it to me, my teacher in school. And suddenly I got to page 374 and I was like, oh shit, where's the next 300 pages?
Really?
So then I went and bought another book. I was like, ये तो पढ़ना पड़ेगा, 300 पेज थोड़ी ना मिस करेंगे बीच में.
अब वो रीगल सिनेमा के बाहर मिलते थे ना पायरेटेड वाले, हम लोग सब वहीं से खरीदते थे बिकॉज
So she had bought me, Fountainhead, and I was like, oh shit, वापस जाके ना पूरी book पढ़ो.
But for many people, and
Yeah.
even today when I often am doing seminars or talking to people about storytelling, and I ask them what their favorite characters and stories, they will go back to Howard Roark and
yeah.
Fountainhead, and some people say, "Oh my God, that's ridiculous! It's an amateur
Yeah.
thing." But it seems to be a figure that
I think I was highly influenced by the perfectionism in his thing,
Absolutely.
right? And I think it's also something that gets kind of put into architecture school because you have, it's not just like teaching, right? Nobody can actually teach you design. You have to kind of discover it yourself. So your classes are not like lectures. You're sitting in a room with actually 5 professors in front of you, 3 hours, 3 days a week, which is actually your design class. Right? There is chai, pakoda, iced tea happening, but at the same time, it's very, very informal. It's not a formal setting at all. So you're sitting on tables and chairs and kind of like discussing whatever you've created. So this idea of crit sessions, like criticism, where you would sit across your professor in little groups and they're just telling you what else you
Is
could
that
do.
helpful?
Absolutely. I mean, the idea is that you're taking one thing and you're evolving it so many times. It's not just one time. So you actually
Iterations are
there's
happening.
20,000 iterations because you spend 6 months
On a project.
on one particular thing, So maybe, and the scale of it increases with each year. So the first year we were asked to, let's say, do a little meditation center. It's like one kamra, right? But the next year, the next semester, for example, you would now suddenly go into saying, create a little bit of a corner of a house, for example, right? So the scale increased every year. Incrementally.
It's like Lego blocks that are coming together.
Exactly. It is exactly that. And I think that's what I really like about, like, if somebody was to say, if you want to be trained in any other subject, I wouldn't say anything else because I actually find that it's a fantastic foundational course for anybody. It does not matter.
Yeah, I so wish somebody bought that kind of design thinking to creativity in a larger space. I know it's happening in some places. IDEO talks about it, other institutes talk about it. But here, I've been dying to go to NID and other places or MICA, etc. Just because I hear of some, or Ashoka, but at least I hear of some modern styles of teaching.
Correct.
And some curriculum of that nature. But otherwise, most of our learning is so by rote, so one way. Honestly, I only remember the teachers with whom one could have that interaction, have that questioning to a large degree.
And I think with SPA in particular, right, like it has a history of pretty eclectic professors.
Yes.
So, we had one where he was a full-on like theatre person, right? So this is Professor Chishti. He had a very particular style. He would wear these Bermuda shorts, this fantastic like cane hat and, half-sleeve shirts. So he was most people actually were very scared of him, but I used to find him very fascinating. He was one of the first people who, he used to teach something called theory of design. The first day in class, I remember he asked us to write an obituary for yourself.
And you wrote one?
Yeah. We all had, it was subject. You had to get marked on it. You had to do it. There was no other way.
Do you remember what you wrote?
Yeah, I remember what I wrote. I think the idea, I kind of wrote about the fact that I was surrounded by a lot of people. I also remember there was something about being known, but not in the traditional sense of it, right? Like being known to being remembered. Actually, yeah, I remember this. Being remembered. I think it was more about being remembered by the people that know you rather than for people to know you.
I tell people so often that occasionally in pulp fiction, you find something that sticks with you. So A Stone for Danny Fisher, which was a Harold Robbins book, and racy Harold Robbins. But that's a book where both the prologue as well as the epilogue were things that I used to elocute. And there's a line in the epilogue which says what you said so beautifully, which says, "To live in the hearts you leave behind is not to die." Right? Because it's just so phenomenal. Even today, that line just keeps staying back with me.
Yeah.
And it sounds so much like you.
Yeah, I feel like that's what I like doing more. I like being in the shadows, but at the same time, I know that everybody who knows me, they're not going to forget very easily.
No, exactly. I don't know. And again, I'm going to quickly fast forward just because, there's so much to talk to you about. You've done dance. You're at the School of Planning and Architecture. There's a year's break you take where you just pursue dance.
Yeah.
Is that at the end of School of Planning?
No, it's at the middle. It's at the so it's a 5-year course, and this was at the 3-year mark.
And why did that happen?
Because I sued my college.
What? Gentle Virkein Dhar sued the college.
Yeah.
क्या हुआ?
Along with many others.
हुआ क्या?
So, जैसे ये design class जो मैंने बोला, तो this is the majority of your day,
yeah,
like
yeah,
in your entire year, right? You spend all of your time culminating all of this stuff and then presenting it to a jury.
Right,
So, which is
right.
both internal and external, and people tell you what to do, and that's your grade. It's not a written exam. But there are 2 or 3 subjects which could still be written exams, like, building services and things like that. So in 3rd year, after the jury had finished for everybody, they put up a random list on outside the office in college saying these people have low attendance, so they cannot take they cannot take the exam next time. I was like, what? Who took attendance? Right? Like, it wasn't a thing because the informality of the course is such that it had never had a history of things like this. But it came under the UGC. I think it got some pressure from, different departments, and they said, karna padega is bari. But it was so random that, we have architecture and planning. It was only for the first 3 years of architecture school and not for anybody else. So not the next 2 years of architecture, not the first 4 years of planning, not the master's students, nobody else. Only
Just
the
the fourth,
bachelor
third year.
architecture for first, second and third year. So there was about 100, 120 people between these 3 years who apparently had less than 75% attendance. So my neighbor at the time was a lawyer. So I called my father and I said, Dekho, ye kya hai, this is that. I mean, he's done things like this. We've done this once before also during my brother's admission in medical school, where earlier... I think I will have to say from my family, I do learn that you fight for what is right, not everything, but some of it. So my dad will fight sometimes, but only when he thinks it's worth it. So even in medical school, when my brother had to get in, we put in a small kind of PIL on the fact that there used to be these, what do they call it? Like different selection times, right? So the first one, the second one, the third one. What used to happen earlier was that anybody who had left a seat in first would never get passed on to the second. So we actually went to court with it, and he did this with another couple of classmates and other people from his school. I think it was one of my brother's classmates' father who kind of pushed him to do it, and he did it. But since then, all of the selections actually take into account, previous seats that people have left behind.
But that's wonderful to know, because
I guess he supported me in fighting.
Yeah, and what happened in the end of your case?
So I mean, we went to the High Court. They gave us a stay order because it was kind of a Friday Monday thing. And at some point, the lawyer for the college, I think he kind of got irritated. It was a bad day he had, and he said in court, somebody had to be a scapegoat, so these guys are scapegoats. So we're like, chalo, bahut achhi baat hai, ho gaya khatam. But this was about 2-3 months in, so we had already gone back to class. We had to still kind of go back to repeating class because there's no system of carry forward in SPA. You have to kind of finish the entire year again. So yeah, we went ahead, and then I think the court basically asked all the kids saying, kya karna hai? Because the college was not willing and did not have the resources and the ability to say that, we can fix this or repeat it in the middle of the year. So they said you just have to wait till the end of the year, and you give that exam again, and it's fine. Now, the choice that we ended up having was that you either go back to class to check, like fix internal grades, or if you're happy with internal grades, then don't go back to class. Just wait for the entire year, wait for the exam to happen again at the end of the year again, and that's when you pass. So obviously, I took the option of not having to go back to class again. And said, chalo, ye bhi try kar lete hain. Swati at the time used to always keep telling me actually that I don't have any focus because, I want to keep my hands and feet in different places. So I said, chalo, ye bhi try kar lete hain. So I told her, here, I have this whole time I'm giving you. I don't have to go to class. I will only be dancing. Tell me what you want to do. So we went, there was like a summer performance that we used to do every year. Spent the whole time. She let me do whatever, everything from production, light, costume, sab kuch kar liya. I guess she was also like, I mean, not that there was a large team that she also had, but I just feel like she also kind of allowed me to do whatever, right? Which was fantastic.
And then you finish architecture.
Yeah,
after-
but at the middle, after that show, I was like, bhai, nahi ho sakta hai. I cannot be dancing all the time. It's only using one side of my brain and my other brain is not happening. So I kind of realized and I kind of like proved my own self right by saying, I cannot just do one thing.
So you finished School of Planning and Architecture. You're now doing a job, or you?
No, I thought nobody would give me a job, so I never looked for one.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because I mean, I truly actually thought that because I said, देखो अब architecture कर लिया. I hate the AutoCAD screen. I hate it. Like I got other people to do my work for me. And if I was to go to any architectural studio today to go get a job, which is who will give me a job, they will make me do exactly this, which I hate. So I cannot do it. Now, who else is going to give me a job because I don't have any other skills, right? नहीं वो तो चल रहा था हाँ मतलब then I kind of like for a couple of years I continued teaching with her but I just knew that this is not happening as a full-time exercise that I want to do, right? And I think that was clear, which was good. I think that year allowed me to just get that clarity and say you have to figure something else out because you need to bring these two worlds together. One of the other things that I kept realizing was that whatever I was doing in school, there was all these kind of like design processes, right? How do you build spaces? How do you kind of, get people to flow from place A to place B? I started using it in the studio, right? In choreography and the other way around. Like I was thinking of people and how people move when I was designing like spaces, right? In architecture school. So then I kind of like in fourth year, you get this opportunity to write a dissertation. So you have to kind of write a long research paper, 6 months. And suddenly I realized and kind of chanced upon this whole connection between space and dance, bodies and architecture. And I suddenly realized I'm not the only person who thinks this. And there are 20,000 other people. And there's all kinds of research papers across the world, who've kind of made sense of this connection and are saying that, yes, this is true. So yeah, I wrote a dissertation on this kind of connection and intersection between architecture and dance, and particularly contemporary dance. So I interviewed 2 or 3 people, both on both ends, kind of asking of what this means in the Indian context. And I think my final thing from it was that there is no difference, that there is a dancer, the dancer's body is able to just amplify that experience. That's about it. So I think the idea of experience, I think came first from that dissertation. Like, what does it mean to experience both space and dance? So that was kind of interesting, but that kind of got me into this half world and say, okay, I don't know what else to do with this, right? Maybe I should become a scenographer. I'd gotten to know of the Prague quadrennial. I was like, yahan pe jana, bahut hi cool jagah hai. They make spaces for performance in the way that you're making sets and things like that. I looked up like the Tisch School of Arts and I said, yahan pe set design bhi hota hai, wahan pe jana chahiye. So there were all of these kind of conversations on scenography and things that I wanted to explore, and I did a little bit of that. So a lot of the unbox thing kind of happened from that space where one of my, somebody who used to teach in college knew of my interest in obviously dance and said, do you want to design this stage for a performance, which was a Bharatnatyam dancer, Jayalakshmi Ishwar, collaborating with her son Avinash on an electronic music 3D mapping, Hanuman going through the universe story performance.
My God, wow.
So, he kind of got me on it. And this was the first Unbox Festival, which happened between British Council and Max Milo Bhavan in Delhi. And he kind of pushed me into this thing about building out this set for the performance. But alongside that was also a food lab. We called it the Food Labyrinth, where it was built only out of packing crates. So, the wooden packing crates.
Yeah, I think you showed me some images of this.
Yeah, so those wooden packing crates and the entire space was made out of that. And actually, that was my first foray into understanding culture and food. Like, there are all these stories beyond recipes or cooking. But there's, all of the stories of food came from there. And this whole farm to table thing was big that time.
And this is 2010.
10.
Got it.
2010.
Wow. There's a lot more still cooking, and I know that Virkein's stories never end, and then she's got a little smile. हाँ, हमने ये भी कर दिया है. Festival भी हो गया, ये भी हो गया, वो भी हो गया. We'll come back in our next segment and quickly explore a few of her stumbles. These are really fun stumbles because from creating one of Delhi's most recognized spaces for theatre and contemporary art, to going on to work with global organizations in creating spaces and making some of those dreams come true. What happens next? How does she come to Stumble? Well, get ready to stumble along after this break. Thank you for listening to Stumble. Why don't you join our tribe of community builders, creators, and culture shapers? If you find this interesting, all you need to do is go and subscribe to stumble.community on Instagram. You're still with us on Stumble with Virkein Dhar. I'm going to talk about her journey in building some really exciting spaces. What actually leads her to looking at collaborations of the kind that she does. And then, of course, Stumble, which is not just our podcast, but also this lovely festival that she imagined. And she was very, very scared at one point in time. I'll tell you that story as we come to it. But Oddbird, I used to hear about it sitting in Bombay all the time. When I talk to brands and they would say, if you want to do an eclectic event, wahan karte hain. I have talked to artists, if you want to do a show, wahan karte hain. What was this place?
It was actually a old paint storage shed that we converted into a black box theatre.
Who's the we?
So there was Shambhavi and Akhil. They're both school friends.
Model?
Came to... No. I do not know them. They came out of nowhere. It was the first time that I'd met them. They came to something that I was curating. I think Shambhavi is the kind who looks up people on social media, things like that. So she was looking me up and somehow felt like we should meet.
Wow.
And yeah, they said that, you seem like the person who knows some spaces and culture and all of that. Can you help us? And at that time, I had a very old research sitting there of spaces in Delhi that, were existing earlier. We had figured that some of them were defunct, not. I said, yeah, sure, here, take this list, figure it out. There's lots of old spaces, that people have... they don't have maybe the funds to run it or whatever. You want to set up a new cultural space. And Akhil had come back from America. So his idea of kind of this creative community space was very LA, right? It was very you're able to be yourself. It's open, it's informal. There's no kind of straight-jacketedness of going into Kamani theatre saying clap, 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 come out. Nobody's having a conversation about it. So I think the interest kind of really came from this very stumbling conversation and them, just reaching out to me coldly. And we continued talking for a couple of months, and I was just supposed to give them this research and get out, right? Say, kar lo, no problem. And because I used to run, because I was running Ignite at the time, the Contemporary Dance Festival. And I said, yeah, sure. And then 2-3 months later, we got talking so much that I was like, yeah, let's do this. And I think there was a couple of things. There was research from before. I had done my thesis in architecture school around redoing industrial spaces, right, for performance. And I had seen it because I went to Germany and Berlin somewhere and I saw, there's a school looking, old storage things that, people have converted. Why can't we do this in India? And then I realized that, when I did my thesis, that the reason was very different, that it wasn't viable. You did it in Europe because they were defunct spaces. Yeah. The government wants to kind of push some, will put a bit of money in it and get people to kind of activate that neighborhood again.
Right.
But in India, if you looked at Delhi, which is what I looked at, the industrial spaces, we actually have almost 7 industrial areas in Delhi. But they used to be on the outskirts. Now they're in the city.
Yeah.
So the value of land and that space is actually much higher.
Madam,
so why would you give it to culture?
Yeah.
Right? You would give it to DLF to make apartment buildings, which is exactly what was happening. So when they kind of came to this and, we actually were looking for commercial spaces. I remember we were looking for market because we all kind of agreed to the fact that you needed food and drink to be able to informally get people together. And that was the biggest difference. For us to be able to do it, we realized that we had to be in a commercial space, otherwise you wouldn't get a license to even serve alcohol. And the interest was to build the space for people like us, right? You go for a film today for an evening out. Why can't you go for a theater show, right? And that was the intention, that why can't you kind of create a space that's actually for friends to do it, and it's not just for theater people, and it's not just for the what we understand as the jhole wala, everybody who sits around in mandi house. So I guess that was the biggest difference, both in terms of design, the way we executed it, the processes that we followed, the fact that it was flexible enough, right? You wanted to bring any kind of show in there. So we kind of, I mean, Akhil is also a bit of a maker in his true self. So there was a lot that we kind of went into, from what the chairs look like. We couldn't find, and obviously there was no kind of like Chinese manufacturing company giving you raked seats, right? Because it was super expensive. We went around looking for it. Asked Sanjoy, I remember, at Teamworks also. And he's like, हाँ वो तो मतलब China से लाना पड़ेगा, raked seating for you to be able to move it, right? Yeah. So like on wheels and things. I was saying, हाँ ये तो मतलब Germany में सब जगह पे था, यहाँ पे क्यों नहीं है? So instead we decided to go with Nilkamal chairs, change the legs height of it, and actually had each and every seat that you could move in any manner, but you still had 4 heights.
Wow.
So I guess a lot of like design thinking around the experience of people. How does a new show come into that space and kind of make it their own? Like that was really interesting, I think, with Oddbird. And that's also why people liked it, because it was the same people coming back, right? And
but you wouldn't give it to brands, I remember. I mean, how many times you would try and you'll be like, no, there's no branding, there's no...
I mean, we said that, you come in, you want to use the space as is. Actually, we created a new space because of it.
Yeah.
So
Next
right
door.
in front of it. Yeah, Shed 9.
But that's a smart thing to do, because, why miss an opportunity when it's coming your way?
They're like, Jameson wants to put green lights everywhere. Do it there, no problem.
But this is, I think, what I'm also hearing from a lot of these conversations, that, okay, you have a certain creative conceit, stick with it. But if there is a commerce opportunity which is on the side, utilize it in whatever manner.
Yeah.
You run Oddbird for the longest time. How does travel, I mean, you've always traveled. From everything I hear, you keep saying you traveled here, you traveled there, what's this urge to travel?
I think in recent times, my partner and I both like traveling, so we take a lot of road trips. But I think
that's recent times. You also found your partner on...
That's true.
Then
I mean,
tell
not
us
on
that.
a road trip, but that was actually from the artistic village, Hoskas village days, where I was at the time, and this was that whole unbox kind of space, and it was very, very active. Like there was designers, there was fashion designers, there was artists, there was graphic people.
Who are the people who are doing things? Just give us some names so we know we can put ourselves in it.
So basically Quicksand, right? And Unbox. So Blot, which used to be Avinash and Gaurav.
Yes.
Then there was a Cell Design, which was a fashion design studio.
Right.
There was a food thing that Avinash started with his then girlfriend Mia, who used to be one of the fashion design guys. And they started a little restaurant, immersive dining, the first immersive dining restaurant right next to Cell Design. It was an empty little cubby hole. And they did the first version of you wearing white aprons. And, there was a chef who was visiting from Australia, and he decided to create this food experience with like, यहाँ से मैंने पत्थर का पीस उठाया और उसको plate बना दिया kind of stuff. So it was actually a lot of cross collaboration. There was a cafe called Flipside. Almost every kind of illustrator, writer at the time used to come hang there. There was Hanif from Start. They used to do a lot of, at the time, actual graffiti in Hoskas village, run away from people, all of that.
And music, apart from Blot, are there any other things happening?
No, I think there was a lot more of the visual guys, not so much, except Blot, I must say. Yeah.
Because I also, there's this constant aspersion that is cast on Delhi, saying that, Delhi doesn't come out for experimental stuff and all for one.
No,
they only come out for big names. बड़ा नाम होगा तो सब आ जाएंगे, वरना कोई नहीं आता. But was there an underground movement happening?
I think there was a lot, like the independent music, dance, theatre, there's so much. Like, there used to be S47.
Why is it not documented? Basement. Why is it not stuff that we've heard about more? I mean, why?
I have no idea.
Right? Somebody should do it. Don't you think?
I did it.
Oh, you did it. No, I know you created a lot of it, and you all were helping.
No, we documented it, right? Like by the end of it, I realized there was so many of these little spaces coming up, right? And I think about 2015 or something, there was so many from Pune, Chennai. I remember somebody had invited me to Chennai for something. Oh yeah, it was a dance performance that used to happen. And I said, okay, I'm in here, let me go see. There were like 2 or 3 very interesting independent spaces that had come up. Something that was a co-working space plus a cafe. Something else that used to do music evenings, but be a workspace in the day. It's almost like a Ramnagar at some point where there was lots of little things happening, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And I saw this almost like a phenomenon. Like I saw it in Pune. There was a bunch of places in the hills. Uttarakhand had a residency, a writing residency. So Dehradun, there's a doctor who now has like a 4-story building, which is an art space because he's interested in the arts and theater. So I just feel like there were a lot of it, and I tried kind of putting it all together and saying, can there be like a independent space touring circuit in the country? Because everybody is constantly struggling with going to each other's cities. We had so many people from Bombay come to Oddbird. But it was always quite hard, right? Because the minute you brought in costs of travel, cost of accommodation, then that 500 rupees ticket price with 100 people that we could accommodate was not enough. So, like Pooja, Sheena, they always used to keep coming. But it was always like we found places, like they stayed in my house when every time they came to show.
There's a little bit of, unfortunately, this is a little bichara kind of syndrome that sort of goes with it. And I find that the West somehow manages to use philanthropy, grants, etc. in such a smart manner. Rashmi Dhanwani, who will also be on our show, has often spoken about saying if you search for it, you can find it. But the West seems to do it better. Like if you go to certain auditoriums, seats are sponsored by individuals.
Yeah.
This chair, just this row. And I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, why can't we do that? यहाँ तो इतना पैसा लोगों के लिए.
I think दिल्ली में एक चीज़ का बहुत big difference है कि लोग, they don't want to pay too much. We've always had a very, like, at least with large theatres, right? I remember going to watch the Vadali brothers in Shri Fort.
Huh.
I went in, the entire balcony, I had a balcony seat. It was full. There were people standing in line outside. The whole of the theatre at the bottom was empty because it was all like reserved for whatever bureaucrat, politician, depending on who the sponsor was. And they're not interested. And I remember actually going up to one of the guys at the event manager and saying, there is a line of people outside. Why can't you let them in? Why can't you let these guys come down? Because the Varali brothers are sitting in front of an auditorium and they can't see anybody. Like, how is that going to be good for anyone?
No, this is where I think this whole issue, particularly in circles of power and privilege, somehow kills art. Because yes, you may be a patron, but isn't it better for you to be a patron who gives that seat away to someone else and stands on the side and says, somebody enjoyed this on my behalf, rather than that seat is reserved for me and my family for a lifetime.
This is a big Delhi-Bombay difference, I feel.
It
is a very big difference.
Yeah, अगर आप नहीं जानते कि मेरा बाप कौन है, कम से कम पता है कि मेरे बाप की चेहरे.
मतलब फ्री का पास दे दो.
And while you can afford buying the whole auditorium out, but the power of getting that free pass, right?
Yeah.
The privilege of getting that free pass. That's what people fight over.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to crack it even today, I must tell you, in Delhi, and we are hoping to do it at the festival we're going to be doing soon. Oddbird happens, again, just because, there's so much to talk about. Why did you do Sundooq and when did you do Sundooq?
So Oddbird, we had to shut down in the pandemic.
Got it.
The landlord wasn't kind of willing to budge, things like that. So it didn't make sense to keep it running. Didn't know for how long, all of that. So kind of that came down. So I guess in the pandemic, I didn't really know what to do because we had kind of started this. I had kind of wanted to go back to making stuff, and I had started that with something called Table Radica.
And Poppy Seed also happens at this time, no?
I think Poppy Seed was basically me thinking that people will take me more seriously if I call itself a name and not Virkein Dhar.
So Virkein Dhar gave herself a name as in a company and called it Poppy Seed, right?
Correct.
Okay. Haan.
So I said, अब करते हैं तो अब अगर तुम 2-3 अलग-अलग चीजें करो तो nobody will question you, which is actually exactly what happened.
You did Table Radica.
Yeah, you did Table Radica. I did a show with Vishal, which was at the India Art Fair. That was more immersive kind of installation with some music involved.
We'll have links of all of these things in case you guys are wondering because it's so beautiful and we can't keep talking about them, but we're going to put all of these down for you to see.
Yeah, so we managed to do a few of that, but I guess pandemic happened. Everything that I was doing before that was immersive, in-person, intimate stuff, right? Like, what do you do online with it? So I said, chalo, kuch nahi karte. Let's go back to I guess some amount of design work. So to kind of like keep alive, I went back to a lot of like design research work, which is where UNDP and stuff like that happened. But Sundooq actually happened because one of my friends told me that they were missing my food, like the food in my house, my parents' house.
It's Kashmiri food.
Which was Kashmiri food. And I said, yeah, but how do I send it to you, right? And I don't know, it was on a whim. I kind of like said, why is it so complicated? You have to do one thing at the other. Because somebody also said at the same time that they tried making it from a recipe.
And it's not easy.
It wasn't happening, right? Like they completely failed. I was like, yeah, but it's so simple. And I had by that time, by the way, never cooked Kashmiri food, right? It was all in theory. I had no idea. Of course, I knew मेरे घर में हमेशा बनता है, मुझे पता है अंदर क्या जाता है, कैसे करते हैं, but मैंने खुद नहीं बनाया था कभी. So I said, क्या होता है, एक साथ डाल देते हैं सब कुछ, let's see what happens. Everybody, there's this somebody, Deshraj, who's been with us ever since I was a kid. So my grandmother has taught him. He was like, ऐसे थोड़ी ना बनता है. And my mother's like, ऐसे थोड़ी ना बनता है. So I was like, ठीक है, try कर लेते हैं. So we actually took all of the ingredients, which I actually meant to go after one after the other. And I said, चलो सब डाल दे तो एक साथ रोगन जोश बनाएंगे. So apparently it turned out to be pretty good. My mother was impressed herself and surprisingly so. I was like, ठीक है, इसको पैकेट में डाल देते हैं. So I made little Ziploc packets and I sent it to 2-3 of my friends saying, अब इससे try कर, बन रहा है क्या? So they were like, हाँ, बन गया. I was like, ये तो interesting है, चलो ये try करते हैं. By that time, in the pandemic, everybody was thinking of food. They were like, देखो सब कुछ चलेगा.
So true. Either food or food for the soul. I mean, both those two
so
things.
everybody was like, देखो ये तो मतलब come pandemic, come anything else, food is always going to sell. So why don't we build something? So I said, okay, let's do it.
And I cannot tell you, guys, you've got to try and you must go and see Sundooq. It's still active, right?
Yeah.
Right? Sundooq.
Yes.
Right? It's the most amazing site where you get these, what should I call them? Premixes?
I mean, ready to cook mixes.
Ready to cook mixes for curries, gravies, and also chutneys. I mean, those chutneys, and you, I'm such a huge fan. 2 kilos is because of just Sundooq, I can assure you. The rest is because of ordering other Kashmiri food and other food like that.
Yeah, but now it's a little bit of everything.
No, I know that. It started with Kashmiri, but it is absolutely brilliant and it is so simple to make. I also tried making akhni once or whatever, etc. 3 घंटे बहुत अच्छी बना दी थी. इलायची और पानी और दही और वो मिलाना और salt और कहाँ से लाऊं, मतलब I was going nuts. But this was so easy and it was, and the packaging and the design and even the quality. I told you saying you're sacrilege that you're not ready making this into your own brand and building this globally. But Virkein does it like Virkein's this little laugh. ठीक है. Like what is this?
करेंगे.
नहीं करना चाहिए. It's amazing. I'm going to now jump to Stumble because we have that little conversation online. After that conversation, I'm in Delhi for Ambedkar, which is the show that I was creatively producing along with Mahua Krishnadev and Samit Garg. And thankfully, not very far from there was what's that area? Which
Lodi Market.
Lodi Market. And there I meet up with Virkein and I do my usual leader is dealer in hope. बस बोलते जाओ कि ये हो जाएगा, ये से होने वाला है, whatever. And I somehow managed to convince her to join us. What made you become a part of Stumble?
I think like Sundooq, right, or any of it, I really like when something is a idea, right? It's just a idea in somebody's head, and suddenly like things start moving, right? And you're like, oh, this can happen, this can happen, this can happen. And I think the minute you take that idea to a real thing, like that's when it's most exciting. Right? So I just felt like, I think at that moment there were both things. One, I really loved the name. And because we spoke about it, and that time you didn't even say what you meant when you said Stumble, right? I kind of went back and thought about it myself. And that's where we got these two meanings,
Absolutely,
right? We got one meaning where I said, oh, Stumble also means that, you've stumbled upon things that you didn't know existed.
True.
But the other part of Stumble was this idea of failing, right? And there was and I've had many conversations with friends around failing, and one of my really close friends was a psychologist, and I actually spoke to her about this festival of failures once, right? We even made a little logo and I said, chal ye karte hain, because I think she every day sees in all of her work that she was doing with people that it really like brings people down. Like the idea and the metric for success is so varied. But I think particularly I see this in the last 2-3 years where in the startup world or even anybody who wants to do something on their own, people kept kind of putting it up as like the lo and behold of this is what everybody should be doing. I said, अब सबको ही entrepreneur बनना है तो फिर job कौन करेगा? And I think the pressure that I saw with people, like I know that, so in Assam where Nalin, my husband, is from, right opposite our house was actually a cafe that somebody ran. And, there were all of these random stories I was listening of people who decided to give up just because they didn't reach a certain metric of success, which is understood by other people. And I just I seriously felt strong about this stumbling thing. And I felt like मैंने तो बहुत बारी stumble कर लिया, next time पे कुछ और हो जाएगा. So it just kind of, I guess, resonated both ends of it, right? Like the curiosity of it, but also the fact that you could talk about stumbles in a positive manner and not that this is the end of your life.
No, and honestly, thank you so much because you helped architect the entire thing. You bought your design thinking because, I saw Miro boards, right? And I'm like, and I'm not good at this stuff. Like, I'm like, "Maine dekh liya hai. I can see the beach. I can see what's happening there." She's trying to figure out. So there'll be so many logistics of this plus that plus whatever, which is what you needed, and it's been so wonderful to have you along on this journey. I must tell you that I am a failed HR manager because I tried very hard to hire Virkein, and then I realized that honestly, at the place that she was, we didn't have we had her on part-time consultancy for a bit, and then she got offered a full-time job.
My first, yes.
Her first full-time job after how many years of a career?
12.
12 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an important thing I want to share with you guys that it's not necessary that everything you do, because so many of you are freelancers, would be doing things as freelancers, and you'll be having parents and other people sitting around saying, "Kya kar rahe ho?" Nothing. But you'll find it. If you find it someday, it'll become permanent. And if it isn't, and you're still a freelancer, God bless you because you're able to do so many different things. You're with so many different people, creating so many unique things.
Yeah.
I think I'm still a freelancer, though I've set up a bunch of companies. But I'm a freelancer. I'm a freelance podcaster today. Yesterday I was a freelance MC. Day before I was a freelance workshopper. And that's what the joy of life is. I'm going to quickly ask you 4 or 5 quick stumbles, right? And not the failure bits because we've heard so many of those. Maybe at the festival itself we'll be talking about it. What's the most fun thing you've stumbled across on one of your travels?
Like giant monoliths in Meghalaya.
Which remind you of what?
So it was, we were just on the road. We actually stopped for chai somewhere. And right opposite that, I saw a little board, and it was an ASI board, and it said this is some, like historical monument. And it actually, then I realized you walk up a bunch of stairs, and they are your own large monoliths across what they now call the Khasi Jaintia Hills in Meghalaya. And it's a thing. There's many of them.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So like the Stonehenge extended.
The Stonehenge of India is in Meghalaya.
My God, what have you stumbled across in terms of something that you read recently?
I wouldn't say recently, but like the most memorable stumble is my cousin who was studying he was doing his MBA at Columbia at the time. He came to visit. He was living in my room, and then he left a book on my bedside table, and he left. I think many weeks later, I was like, "Ye kya book hai? Main dekhti hu." And it was this book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
Right. Beautiful.
And it was just fantastic. I think it just I had not heard of all of those things before, right? From behavioral economics. I got to know Freakonomics from that because it's, Stephen Levitt is one of
You listen to the podcast?
Yeah. All of them. And so I kind of got really interested in this idea of how people were looking at just how people think. And that was super interesting, right? Because you're like, if you're making for people have to consume it. Now suddenly this idea of economics and what does it mean what does it mean when you start to use it in marketing? How do you kind of start to use it in the way brands use it? So there were all these little examples that they keep showing, and they keep talking about on Freakonomics as well. So these social experiments, which are pretty interesting things. So that was a book I stumbled upon, which was, I would say changed the course of life.
And anything in terms of music or film that...
In recent times. Actually, I chanced upon in the Northeast, because I'm not much of a rapper, like rap music fan, but the Northeast cipher is what I chanced upon. Somebody shared it with me.
Okay.
Do you know of it?
No?
So the Northeast cipher is basically like just for the northeastern states, a rap music competition. But it has some fantastic musicians. And what's super interesting is the content, the writing. So sometimes there are people from the north who also come in, and there's a bit of a crossover. But they're actually talking about rap, right? Like the real rap that we're talking about, gully boy style. They're talking about their struggles every day, their identity, within the Indian context, especially because they're in the Northeast. But fantastic music.
No, it sounds incredible. You can see Virkein's eyes light up. No,
Yeah.
they're like this beacon.
Because actually, when I was young, I hated rap. I did not like the music. I just thought it was too
noisy.
Yeah, I like Dire Straits. You know what I mean? Like when you compare that to like rap music, I was like, nahi ho pa raha hai. Matlab, theek hai Eminem, but suna tha maine us time pe, sang along for a bit in school, but and that's why I haven't gone looking for it. But suddenly when you kind of realize that it's actually fantastic writing, music, everything. I now follow them. It's on Spotify, all of their music.
I'm going to do it. And we'll share a link to the to that music as well. We can continue talking endlessly, because every time we've had conversations, they've been so rich, and honesty have been so meaningful as well. And sometimes I feel that if God had a set of people who were taking care of different worlds, you would be one of the people taking care of the world, but you'd be giggling through it all, right? People would be like, did you make that
too
world?
Nice to me, yeah.
No, why can't I be nice to you?
No, you should be. But you listen. I think it's also about listening as much as seeing.
No, I think absolutely, and that's what's wonderful. Virkein's in Goa now, and
with a pool right in front of me.
With a pool right in front of you.
Yes.
Do you wake up in the morning, have a cup of tea, and go?
Yes, I am not kidding.
That's why. Keep working to your dream house, to your dream, whatever you guys want to. What would you say to anybody who doesn't know about Stumble and you're trying to pitch it to them to say, come? What would you tell them?
I would say, I guess, two things. One, it's for anybody and everybody who wants to make with people, right? I think it's important where I feel, and every time I speak to people in the creative space, I find they're almost often find themselves being very lonely. I love vibing with people and sharing a story or sharing an idea for it to actually come back to me in a way that I can act on it. Without me actually sharing it with someone, I'm never able to act. That's just me. So I just feel like, and we talked about this yesterday at the Stumble Salon as well, right? Where you have to share what you're thinking and things will happen. You have to ask for what you're saying, and somebody will come back and be interested.
Right.
I think this is a very late learning for me, where I wouldn't share it earlier. And I feel like just coming in and sharing it with people who you think will listen, who will probably become your collaborators, who will probably connect you to some random person, and that is what you're going to stumble upon. And you will not even know when something happened, right? Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not at Stumble, but 3 weeks later, something will happen. And I just feel like to make that happen is why you have to be at Stumble. It doesn't matter if it happens in those 3 days or not, but just being in that space would be enough. And there will be absolutely at least 10 things that you'll take back for you to remember.
No, absolutely. I think that's wonderful. I'm so looking forward to doing this, and I'm sure that the format we've now selected, which is slowly building this tribe, this community, and then getting them there, seems to be a slightly more thought through than Roshan saying, February kar dete. Which would scare Virkein so much. One of the beautiful things about Stumble is also the design and the way it was done. Brewhouse, this agency that you only pointed us to in Delhi, did some brilliant work with us, including this logo, including a film that you all will see maybe at some stage before the launch. But there were also these Ganjifa cards, and you found these, again, Ganjifa cards was something which were like, ye kya hota hai? What was the idea behind it, and which one is your favorite?
Favorite is very hard to say. But the idea behind it was actually two. So if you see the edges of it. So the Ganjifa cards are actually old playing cards back from they came from Persia, as far as I understand from history. And it was similar in the way that, our, what do you call it? The game that we have. चार वाला नहीं चार वाला चौकोर वाला जो game है. So it was similar where they would kind of play this, but within the cards there were characters that were drawn, and these were all hand drawn cards and characters. We actually came upon them because of the fact that we want to do the first tumble in Konark in Orissa. So went around kind of digging into Orissa history and found that some of the largest hand painters of Ganjifa cards are in Orissa. In a lot of the artist communities there. And we wanted to make our own version of the Ganjifa cards, but fun enough for you to be both curious, inspired, and just playful, actually, more than anything else.
That's so nice.
The other side of it were, do you remember Tazos that used to come in Lay's chips earlier? Both in different sizes. So so the idea of it was, of course, Tazos would fly, but this one doesn't fly. But I think this idea of making it and each of the designs on themselves, I will say they don't have a meaning, but
you give it your meaning.
You kind of build your own meaning, right? So the interest is to kind of see what it means for you, and that's what you take back. And I think that's the same for Stumble.
Absolutely. Make what you can of it.
You take what you can. So we'll just bring the right people in, and everybody says what they can, but you take back what you really are looking for.
That's so wonderful. You know, what you seek will find you, right?
Yep.
Incredible. And I'm waiting for you to tell me which is one of your favorites in this. I know you love them all.
So hard.
But playfulness is something that I'm actually going to take away from this session, because a lot of what Virkein has done, I think one thing that defines her is playfulness. I found that to be unique. And for all of you who are creating, don't forget the child in you. Don't forget to play. Don't forget to giggle, have a laugh at yourself when needed, because I think it's an equally important part of creation and whatever you make. So everybody who's on the other side, put a smile on your face. You've had a lovely time with Virkein, and hopefully me as well as the host. Let's see, Virkein, you found what you were looking for?
I like one which is super nice, and I want to tell everybody actually.
Yeah.
Is this the QR code one? So when we were also designing this, I got to know the origins of the QR code. And I really like origin stories, actually. I love them.
Yes.
I'm so curious about where things have come from. I'll go looking for etymology. When I got married, I looked up the etymology of the word honeymoon. All of those things where they said that there was a big jar of honey.
Yeah.
Right? And the intention was that jab tak ye chalega, you got this when you got married. Until this honey lasts, this is your happy period. Do whatever you want. Nobody's going to say anything to you. Once the honeymoon, the honey finishes, then come back to reality. There's no more love anymore. It's just about getting things out and getting things done. So I was like, इसीलिए मैं ना honeymoon पे नहीं जाऊंगी. So the QR code and the history of how it actually got built, right? And the idea was that barcodes, everyday barcodes that we used to use, had a problem where if you had even one little section that was slightly damaged, the barcode wouldn't go through.
Right.
So they actually created the QR code, which just brings together 3 parts of it. So it's almost like creating 3 barcodes together and put it in a certain pattern where even if almost 1/3 of it is not there, you'll still be able to scan it. So it kind of just became like a foolproof scanner for many things. It didn't kind of take off in the same way for commercial use in terms of in terms of barcodes. For other reasons, I think it's the numbering of it and things like that. But that was super interesting. Actually, we had a long conversation with Brewhouse about this one. So it's nothing really, but it's one of them. One side is this woman, right, with a little sun on it.
Right.
And the other side is the woman with the eyes. And I remember having a conversation with them, and we said that, so somebody said that like this, like where the eye is, where the sunlight is kind of starting off from is behind here. But I think for me, I think at the time I was very upset with somebody. I said, I can look into you and be very angry. So I wanted to use this card and I used it once also, and I said, which means
Lord.
don't talk to me now and go away.
Wow. So now you know Virkein, if she's
If
standing
I'm
next to you,
angry, then yeah.
yeah, then that card will come at you. That's fantastic, Virkein. I know that you can keep giving meaning
And
to
this
us and
one.
telling
This
us.
I guess
Yeah.
a lot of people say, no?
Yes, they do. The
Right.
Earth is not a round.
Even
right?
the Earth isn't a perfect,
Perfect
sphere.
sphere.
And this was also very late learning on perfection because of Ayn Rand. Because Ayn Rand kept saying, you have to be perfect before you do anything. And I was like, so you have to be perfect before you say anything to anybody. And that kind of got stuck. So now I believe in this now.
That's fantastic. Virkein, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for taking time, for being here from Goa.
Thank you.
But it's really, really a pleasure doing this with you. And I'm just so happy that you're part of this stumbling journey of ours. I hope that one day you'll be able to sit back and this will be an origin story that you could talk of.
I would love that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you liked watching this podcast, then don't forget to share it, subscribe it, and like it so that you can then stumble across many more such conversations.